Good evening to you all, and welcome. I'm glad to see so many people here. And so what we're going to do is begin with a prayer, because that's always a good way to begin. And then we're going to do a little mindfulness practice, just so that we can settle ourselves, and then we'll have the class. So why don't we begin with a prayer that I like to say before any sort of endeavor like this. Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, in thy name, I bind and silence all powers and forces that do not accept thee as Lord and King, in the air, in the water, in the ground, the netherworld and nature, and the spiritual world. I bind all demonic action and demonic communication. Lord, seal this whole place, all of us here and all our intentions, in the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Mary, we ask thee to surround us with thy mantle of protection and crush Satan's power in our lives. We ask you and all our guardian angels to defend us in battle against Satan and the powers of darkness. Amen. That's a pretty powerful prayer, isn't it? So we're going to begin this mindfulness class with actually being mindful. And what I would like you to do is, it's a poem. Now there's different ways of entering into mindfulness. We're going to begin with a poem because I think it's kind of mindfulness light in a lot of ways. Thank you. And I'd like you to be aware during this of, as you listen to the words, listen for the words. Pay attention to your imagination. Pay attention to your thoughts, your memories, any feelings that might come from it, even physical body sensations. We're mind, body, and spirit. We are incarnate beings as humans, which means that our body is very important, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, as well as our thoughts, and of course, the spiritual movements of the spirit within us. This is a poem that I love very much that has moved me in my life, called Love After Love by Derek Walcott, a Caribbean poet. And what I'd like you to do is, if you feel comfortable, to just sit and close your eyes as we hear this, so that the normal everyday distractions of life don't interrupt us. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. We'll just sit with that for a moment and be mindful of what you're experiencing in that. And welcome. Welcome to this first Mindfulness in an Anxious World class. I want to welcome not only those of you who have come out, and there's many of us here, can't see them on camera, but for everyone that's watching at home, that's watching all over the world. We have people in our parishioners, we have friends of parishioners, we have healthcare professionals, we have people in ministry, priests, deacons, seminarians are watching as well, those that are in pastoral ministry, lay people, and even people from other countries. So welcome to everyone and to all that are going to be watching it as we continue this class over the next 12 weeks, probably. I'm one of those teachers, I'm glad I don't have a semester schedule where I have to give you an exact syllabus, because you say something and then you say, you know, that's really good, we should have a class about that. And so we'll be a little free in that. But first let me say how proud I am of you. I'm really proud of you. For one, recognizing that anxiety is something that all of us deal with in one way or another. And to be able to sit back for a moment and say, I'm struggling, that I am having a difficulty, that requires a great amount of vulnerability to oneself, as well as vulnerability to others, to be present, or to even to tune in. Many people will listen to this on podcasts, will listen to this, and I want to say to all of them, it takes a great amount of courage to admit that we need help, that we need to take time to do that. And this will be available, and at the end I'll tell you how you can tune in more regularly on this or to share it with people. But I particularly want to thank all of you who physically came, who are struggling with being in a public place with people right now during this COVID time. I don't want to call it a crisis, because it's an overused word. We've gotten to the point where everything's a crisis now. Like everyone's a hero. What's the point of saying it if everyone is that? Let's not call it a crisis. Let's call it an opportunity. It's an opportunity to trust, and an opportunity that you and I have been able to now fear. And when we face fear, Jesus is there. What's the main thing that he always says to his apostles? Be not afraid, be not afraid. He says it ad nauseum. He's always saying it. Be not afraid, don't be afraid. Because it's the biggest thing we deal with, is fear. And today, we're going to take that step in recognizing how we can deal with fear, how we can deal with anxiety in a very good, beautiful, peaceful way. When I was a kid, one of my favorite movies to this day is Anti-Mame. I love this movie. It's an old movie from a long time ago with Rosalind Russell. If you haven't seen it, great film. Don't know if it's available on Netflix. If not, buy it, rent it. It's fantastic. Old film. And in it, Mame Dennis, who's the main character, she's a woman full of zest, life. Nothing holds her back. Nothing takes her down. She goes through the loss of 2 husbands. I don't want to tell you too much of the story. She was rich, and then all of a sudden she's in poverty. She's alone. Then all of a sudden she has friends. It's back and forth. And there's a great line that Mame Dennis says. And I love this movie because my grandmother, to me, my nan, was Auntie Mame. She was Nanny Mame. And she lived like this. And this is the line from the movie. Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving. You have to live. And I think right now, you and I are all hungry. We're starving. Because we saw life as a banquet, and then all of a sudden we were told, well, not only do we have no more buffets that we can go to, but it seems that life that was this buffet that was open to us, now all of a sudden we're trapped in our house, we're trapped behind masks, we're trapped. And that can cause a great amount of anxiety and suffering. So for those of you that are here, those of you that are considering coming, thank you. Because you have taken a bold step, a brave step in doing that. Now I want to say that I am a Catholic priest. I know many people that are watching are Catholic. I know many people that are here or watching are not Catholic, but perhaps Christian or of other faiths or of no faith. What I'm going to talk about here applies to all of us because we all share something, and that's humanity. But I'm going to come at it from a Christian point of view, a Christian understanding, that is going to be very Christian, indeed very Catholic, because this is what I profess and believe. I'm not a psychologist, though I will use psychology. I'm not a medical doctor or a neuroscientist, though I will use throughout this class neurobiology, physiological references, and things like that. I do not pretend that is my specialty. However, I am someone who suffers with anxiety and have had to walk down that lonely road. And it's painful. And I know many of you suffer or have suffered that pain. And so I tell you that what we're going to talk about in this class is merely something that has helped me in my life tremendously. And so I am here to be a professor. I profess this to be valuable. And I would love to hear people's other experiences as well with it as we go along. So I'm going to go into anxiety in the next class and really go into depth in it. But let's get into the anxiety bit for a bit, okay? I think the best analogy of anxiety, I was once chased by a hippopotamus through Madison Square Garden. Now that I was. I'm not being image driven here. I used to work for the circus, at Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, the greatest show on earth, was the greatest show on earth. And one day I was walking along in the garden, and I was backstage. I had things to do, and I was walking. I had my laptop over my arm. I had a newspaper in my hand, and I'm walking and doing what you're supposed to do. And when you're in a place like Madison Square Garden in the middle of Manhattan, it's big. You don't have to watch where you're going. No, you just don't run into somebody. You can always tell someone who's not from New York by the fact that they run into people. New Yorkers don't. There's a center of gravity that we have, and we just understand and we move. Well, I'm in my own business, not paying attention to anything other than the daily news. And as I was walking, suddenly my foot planted itself in something very soft that moved. And I lifted the newspaper and looked up, and behold, Zusha, the queen of the Nile, a 7,000-pound hippopotamus, was sunning herself out in the field, out in the concrete. And she was relaxed. And I look up, and the 3 baboons that used to flip on her back and do an act, they were laughing at me, because that's what baboons do. They're there to taunt you. And Zusha suddenly got it in her mind that this uppity guy kicked her. I happened to kick her in the face. Kicking hippos in the face, not a good idea. And so suddenly I looked, and she started to get up. And now watching a hippo get up is pretty impressive, but let me tell you, watching a hippo run is even more impressive. But what's not impressive is when a hippo runs after you. They're fast. And I wasn't thinking, apparently if you weave in and out, they can't run as fast, like alligators. I didn't do that. So I start running in a straight line, and Zusha starts chasing me, and I'm running as fast as I humanly can. The newspaper flies, the laptop flies, I'm getting rid of my keys, my jacket, the whole thing. I'm running, I'm trying to make myself as light as possible. I am going to die. And I'm just thinking about the idea of what's going to happen, that my mother is going to get a phone call that says, your son was killed by a hippopotamus on 34th Street. And she's going to say, what is this, like an old Bob Dylan song or something? And say, no, he really was. I was petrified. My fight or flight response kicks in. My sympathetic nervous system is charging like crazy. I'm running. All of a sudden, I'm trying to be the gazelle. The lion is behind me, and I am just going. And she's gaining on me until finally I was able to stop behind one of those big pylon things that the elephants would stand on. And I'm like, back, Zusha, back. Until finally Gunther Gable-Williams, the great animal trainer, comes running over, and he rescues me. And he's laughing hysterically and joking with me in German. God rest his soul. What a good man. And I was there, and I said, that's it. I could have died. That's anxiety. Anxiety is feeling like we're being chased by the hippopotamus in our life. And the baboons are laughing at us because we feel like we're going to die. And when we get anxious, that sympathetic nervous system is very sympathetic of our stress and our pain. And so it kicks in saying, run, be alive. Until finally what we have great trouble doing is activating our parasympathetic nervous system. Just think para, like paramedic. Oh my gosh, you're in trouble? Come, let me soothe you and relax you. That's our tend and befriend response. But what happens to us so often with anxiety and living in a very anxious environment and an anxious world is that our sympathetic nervous system kicks in all the time. It's very helpful to have that when you're being chased by a hippo. It is not helpful to have it kicking in if you're not. And perhaps you will tell me otherwise, but I doubt any of us here are being chased by hippos. And yet we feel like we are, don't we? Isn't it possible? Isn't it that pain in our lives so often, that deep darkness, the constriction of our heart, of our chest, the uneasiness, perhaps the gut pain that happens, the fear, the little death that constantly is taking us over? We're screaming for relief, and it's like no one else is there, and we hope for an answer. And medication can sometimes help. Counseling certainly can help. And I want to, every time I teach this class, I'm going to recommend to you, if you suffer from anxiety, and you particularly think that you suffer from an anxiety disorder, which is consistent, persistent, and constant, then please see a counselor. There's no shame in seeking psychological help at all. There was, like years ago, I think, just because people didn't understand what psychology was, they thought you were a bit touched. They thought maybe you were a bit off in the head. But that's not, you're not crazy if you seek help. You're crazy if you don't. And so I really want to help you to understand that. And then this is going to be basically a way of saying, do I need it? What are some of the things I can do on my own? And then give you a lexicon or as a vocabulary to be able to go to counseling and say, this is my problem, this is how I'm feeling, and these are the things that I've been doing myself. And there's a lot of really good, thankfully in Northern Virginia at least, there are a lot of really good counselors, Catholic counselors, Christian counselors, that have a good anthropology, or in other words, a good Christian understanding of the dignity and value of the human person. So I really want to encourage that. And if you need, on my website, and I'll go through this at the end, I'm going to put recommendations of who you can go to. So that's anxiety. We're going to go through anxiety next week, talk a little more medically about anxiety, a little more psychologically, and then we're going to go into a lot of things which I'll explain at the end of this class. But what I would like to do now is talk a little bit about mindfulness, because that word can be a very loaded word. It's, I would call a trigger word for some people. Many places have it all over the place. You could go by spas, yoga studios. You can go to vacation points, cruises, which no one goes to anymore. You can go to studios and books. There's books about it. There's YouTube videos all about it. It's in churches and synagogues and mosques and temples and all those different things. But everybody goes to mindfulness a different way. And as a Catholic in a Catholic church, as a Catholic priest, let me explain to you what I'm talking about mindfulness. Because I said, it is that trigger word. Or there's words that's like, oh, I don't know what that means. I feel uncomfortable when you use that. Right? So think of like, here's another word that'll make you feel uncomfortable. Gender. You say that here, you say that out there, you say that at school, you say that at work, you say that wherever. Everyone's going to have a different interpretation of that word now. So we need to define our terms, and we also need to say what we do and do not believe in things so we can understand. Mindfulness can be that way. So what is mindfulness? How am I approaching it? Let's go with this definition. It's paying attention to the present moment without judgment or criticism. Paying attention to the present moment without judgment and without criticism. It's a way of being aware and of having acceptance in the present moment. It's literally waking up. It's coming to my senses. Fullness of my mind, mindfulness. And it also helps to become aware of the real workings of my mind. Like, what is real? What's the really real? And what's not real? And in anxiety, that can be a problem for us, can't it? In an anxious moment, we might start to have what we call cognitive dissonance, which we'll have a whole class on. These false beliefs that I can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not real, what's a fabrication and what's something I really should be worried about. And so the mind and the body is naturally, it's there to protect us. Like the main basic function of our mind is to protect us. And so we can get very anxious and in a lot of pain in that self-protection because we're not aware of what's real. And we see how easily distracted we become, and it helps us, mindfulness helps us to be present in the moment. It's a great scene I love from the movie The Born. By the way, I make references to movies all the time, and I'm not saying that I recommend them, because, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I recommend a movie and then I forgot about that one scene that I shouldn't recommend. So I'm not recommending the movie, but it's a good movie, I like it. And there's a great scene. Jason Bourne is an assassin who has forgotten who he is. He has amnesia because of an accident and an attack. And he's trying to figure out who he is, all for 3 movies and then a great spin-off. He's trying to figure out exactly who he is. And he's in a cafe with Marie Kreutz, who is this German girl that he's with, and played by Franca Potente. Great role. And Jason is there, and he's trying to come to his senses. And in that moment, he says, he's sitting there at the cafe and he says, I can tell you the license plate number of all 5 cars out in the parking lot. I can tell you that the waitress is left-handed and that the guy at the bar weighs 215 pounds and can handle himself. I can tell you that the best place to look for a gun is in the glove compartment of the red truck out there, and at this altitude, I can run for a half a mile before my hands start to shake. Now, how is it I know that? And I don't know who I am. He was aware. And that's one of those scenes where people are like, yeah. Right? Like I know the guys are probably like, yeah, we want to be that aware. Right? I'm always amazed. If you see a suspicious character or a package walking around the airport, please, by all means, they don't say that, call security and let them know. Well, and then you see everyone walking around like, what flight do I have? And no one's aware. We live in the least aware society ever in the history of mankind. Cavemen were the most aware. And we have devolved since then. Why? Because cavemen were being chased by saber-toothed tigers. We're not. And the fact is that because we've become so mindless that we hear things like what Jason Bourne said, but we don't know who we are. We've lost a sense of identity in so many ways. Mindfulness helps us to regain that. We're born into it, if you think about it. I mean, every baby is mindful. They're watching everything. Any of you that have children, you know that, right? The minute you say a word, particularly the words you probably shouldn't have said, all of a sudden it's like, bam, new word, vocabulary, added, no spell check necessary. You know, the kids, they get it, and they notice everything, and they're walking around going, oh, look at this. Oh, this is the coolest thing ever. This could kill me? Sure, I want to play with that. Why not? And they want to look, they want to experience. They're mindful. And then we get to a point all of a sudden where we stop being. What is that? Why is that? We stop being creative. We stop being mindful. There's something that happens in that. In the womb, we see, we delight. Think about in the womb, what happens? You're in silence. Now, apparently the womb is not silent. It sounds more like a vacuum cleaner all the time. That's why babies sleep better in white noise. But the fact is that's why I sleep better in white noise. But the fact is, it's one consistent sound. There's a silence to it. We start to develop and grow in silence. We're mindful of everything. In mindfulness, we focus on sensory and physical aspects of the present moment as a preparation for a deepening experience of intimacy with God, with ourselves, our own very selves, and with others. That's mindfulness. And we recognize different thought patterns when feelings and physical sensations that occur, continue to occur. We learn to tell the difference between sensations, thoughts, and feelings. A lot of times you ask someone how they're feeling and they tell you a sensation. I'm tired. It's not a feeling, it's a sensation, right? Kids do that a lot too. How are you? I'm tired. Okay. So what happens? We touch upon that experience, and it's incredibly Catholic. St. Francis of Assisi used to go up on a regular basis from Assisi up to what's called the Carcery. It's the hermitage up on the hill of Assisi, the main part of the mountain. And he would go there and spend days in fasting, meditative prayer on the Word of God, and he would just be. Right? He would merely be in the presence to say, Brother Sun, oh Sister Moon, Brother Wolf, Sister Squirrel. And people are like, it's the first environmentalist. Not at all. St. Francis of Assisi realized that he, by simply the act of meditation and being, realized that he exists. That he is not God. He is not the creator of all this that he sees. That God, who creates, also sustains all things in being, including himself. In sustaining all things in being, God always having us in mind, he is the sustainer of existence, that I can say, my brother Sun and Sister Moon, I can say that there is a connection I have with all of these things because I exist and so do they. So mindfulness is not trying to escape existence. Mindfulness is being very present in the act of existing. And then it has to do as well with the quality of awareness, the quality of my presence that I bring to my everyday living. Mindfulness isn't just a practice that I then walk away from. Mindfulness is a way of being. So that, in effect, we can be like Jason Bourne. I can walk into an airport or into a place, and I can sense danger because I can sense it in my own self. I can sense where I am and where others are in relation to me. I have situational awareness, but at the same time, I have existential awareness. I'm aware of my being, my feelings, my thoughts, and others It's a way of living awake. Like that old song, with eyes, I don't know the rest of the words. I have no idea what the guy is saying. All I know is that little thing, with eyes wide open. We have to be living with eyes wide open. And most of us live with eyes wide shut. Mindfulness will change that. Human beings are human beings. We're not human doings. And we're so like busy all the time and doing stuff all the time that we get caught up in it and we lose ourselves. Mindfulness helps us to find ourselves once again. It's consciously focusing the mind in the present moment without judgment, without attachment to the moment, so that I can see the moment unfold before me. I can see it there. Mindfulness practice is repeatedly bringing my mind back to that awareness. And we see it when we sit and we try to concentrate on something. My mind goes off, and I pull it back. And my mind goes off, and I pull it back. We all have ADD. It's called humanity. And it goes back. And what mindfulness practice does is recognizes a thought, and then I let it go. And I recognize the next one, and I let it go. And I don't try to control it. It's repeatedly letting go, not just of the thoughts, but the judgments and attachments that I have to the current thoughts, the emotions, the sensations, and the activity that I have in that particular life situation. And it also makes me curious. Like when we're mindful, we become curious about being alive. Some time ago, I was walking with a student when I was walking, and he was in a panic. He was going through a very difficult time. And I said, stop. Wait a moment. I said, look at this. And I leaned over and I just grabbed this flower. It was spring and the wildflowers were growing. And there was this flower that had the most intricate geometrical shapes on it. I said, well, that's fascinating. And I picked it up and I grabbed another one. And I grabbed a whole handful of them and I look and I go, well, they're all geometrically similar. And yet, and he looked at me and he said, how did you even notice that? I said, I don't know. I guess I'm being mindful. And it's a practice that we have to constantly live. That mindfulness awareness of the moment, because I can't be curious and unhappy at the same time. That biologically, systemically, within my mind, neurologically, I can't be curious and unhappy at the same time. They're opposites. If you ever notice, people that are unhappy have lost curiosity. Happiness studies, one of the big indicators of happiness study for people, especially in aging, usually around my age. So I'm 48. Usually around my age, midlife, what happens is that people go on two different trajectories. There's the people who continue to be curious and continue to learn. They educate themselves, they continue to read, they pick up a new creative habit, a new creative activity, art, something like that, dancing, something, whatever, either individually or as a couple. And what happens is you see, the studies are indicating that in that continue learning, continue education, their happiness levels, though they might have their bumps and bruises, continue to escalate. They go into their aging years, not only gracefully, but they go in with a greater amount of happiness and curiosity. People who don't do that, that's where you start to see decline. You see decline in physical health, you see decline in mental health, you see decline in spiritual health. And that's the damn kids these days. That person lost their curiosity. If you ever catch yourself going, kids these days, go be curious about something and find out what that kid is curious about, and you'll be happy again. It's that simple. It really is that simple. Curiosity points to an awareness of what's happening in the particular moment. That's why it's so easy as we get older to be more afraid when we watch the news. You ever watch younger people like, yep, world's falling apart. Yep, I'm going to go to work, right? They're going and they're doing things, okay? We get older and it's like, did you hear about, I can't believe what's going on. And the world is falling apart. Nancy Pelosi got another haircut. What's happening? Like we actually are panicking about this woman getting a haircut and things like that. It is scandalous. But at the same time, it's just like, what's happening? Why is that taking away my peace? That's so unimportant. Because we lose curiosity. And then we start to panic and our kicks in and we find ourselves constantly in a state of fear. Mindfulness allows us to delight in creation and in our Creator. It's about recognizing the miracle of being. Can you allow yourself to sit back and recognize the miracle of being? You exist. I exist right now in this place. The past is irrelevant. It's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. We don't have to ruminate about it. And the future has not happened. If we're not present, the worries of our future will become our reality. Because all of those problems happen when we're not present. Mindfulness allows us to recognize the miracle of being and then bring an appreciative awareness to it so that I can really be alive. I just delight in the miracle of being alive when I'm mindful. That's why people who are really mindful, the saints, kind of seem like they're a little crazy to people who aren't. There's a great story of Mother Teresa. There's so many great stories of mothers. You want a story, go read about Mother Teresa. So ordinary and yet so saintly and mystical and heroic. Mother Teresa was there, and she was praying, and she started to glow. And there was a young priest that was next to her. And she looked over at him, she said, "I feel nothing." And then she went back to prayer. Mother was so aware of the presence of God that she was literally reflecting the divine Son of God. Yet she felt nothing but was completely present to the experience. I will never forget meeting Pope John Paul II and being with him and looking into his eyes. Twice I looked into his eyes, and he had such peace, even though he was suffering horribly the last time from Parkinson's disease, and he couldn't even, his face was paralyzed. He was so alive in his eyes, and he was, in that moment of looking at me, I touched his arm, and I looked at him and I said, "Holy Father, I love you. I pray for you every day. I thank God for the gift of your life." And he just reached up, and he couldn't say anything, and he patted my hand, he rubbed my hand on his arm, and then he reached up and he held my face, and he just looked at me. He beheld me, and I beheld him. And in that moment, nothing else existed. In that moment, no other worry or concern was there. In that moment, I looked into the eyes of Jesus Christ. Because I looked into the eyes of his intimate friend. I looked into the eyes of Peter. And when Peter looks at Jesus, you see his reflection. That's a gift that not only Peter the fisherman had, but all of the fishermen afterwards. That is a man who is present and mindful to the mystery of life. It's the loving experience that's unfolding within me, and when I'm able to recognize that, I'm able to see the loving experience of the one who is without. Doesn't Jesus tell us, when you pray, go to your inner room and there pray to your Father who is in heaven? Don't we say in Mass, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed"? Not in my physical house, in my physical house, in the house of me. I encounter Jesus Christ here within me. If I'm not present and aware and mindful of me, of my existence, of what I'm going through, of my experience in the moment, I can't meet Jesus. Jesus is not like that horrible song from the 80s, "Somewhere out there." Oh, what a terrible song. God is not somewhere out there. Don't people say, "I'm going to offer up a hope to the universe for you"? No, please don't. The universe is not listening. God is. And where is he? He's not on Saturn. He's here. He's here within you, within me. Are you aware of him? Mindfulness helps us to do that. From someone who had mindfulness and yet at the same time was very secular. Henry David Thoreau, Walden, one of my favorite books. Henry David Thoreau says, "We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us, even in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestioned ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it's far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, to affect the quality of the day, That is the highest of arts. You and I can all be artists by affecting the quality of our day. And that comes from within. It's seeing life not as a math problem to be solved, but by a sunset to be appreciated. Imagine that. We're doing all the time. A lot of us have technical skills. A lot of us the technical professions are what America is about. America doesn't care about philosophy. America cares about building things and going far and fast. Right? And so what happens is we say mathematics and engineering, which are all beautiful, noble and good and necessary. But what happens is that in doing that, our culture has lost the appreciation of a sunrise. It's lost the beauty of an aria. It's forgotten what it's like to sit still and be. And we're here to rediscover it. So what do we do? How are we going to enter into mindfulness? I'm going to give you some steps. These will be available all on my website, and I'll tell you at the end about that. First, we observe the experience. Observe the experience of whatever you're doing right now, like you're sitting, listening to me. Observe the experience. Not evaluating it, but observing it. We do that, don't we? This is going to help you so much in your relationships. It's going to be awesome. When we say, it's how often we're like, are you listening to me? Are you listening to me? You hear this in marriages all the time. He doesn't listen to me. Well, she doesn't listen to me. She's just listening to herself. Talk, right? And those are the complaints. Those are the arguments. All these different things, right? Why? Because we're not present to the person. How often have you and I gotten into a conversation and we're thinking about the next thing that we're going to say in response to that person? Right? And then they sit and they go, were you listening? That's not even what I said. I'm looking around the room right now and I see couples going, It happens. So we observe the experience, not evaluating it, not judging it, observing it. And we allow it to unfold. Just observe it as it happens. What's the mystery of this person in front of me? And then we put it into words and describe what's happening internally. And communally, we share it with people at the end of our practice. And we bring deliberate attention and awareness to the thought, non-judgmentally. Non-judgmentally. We have to make moral judgments to say if that's right or that's wrong. Why? Because otherwise the world goes into chaos. But we can listen. It's not like I like this and I like that. I agree with them, I don't agree with them. No, just listen. Just experience. We don't have to agree with whether or not we feel the air brush against our face. We can just be aware of it. We allow non-reactivity to our internal distress. Because when we sit still for long enough, we start to get distressed, don't we? And it could be a distress like, oh my gosh, I forgot to take the laundry out of the washer and put it into the dryer. Oh my gosh, it's going to start smelling like mildew by the end of the day, and then I'm going to have to do it again. I'm going to have to waste another pod. And all of a sudden, that becomes the most important thing in the world, doesn't it? It's like, what does it matter? It's a pod. Just don't let the kids eat it. Non-judgmentally, and we deliberately suspend our judgment on things because the mind is prone to do this. Why? Because the mind is a problem solver. Like, we're made to solve problems because if you and I don't solve problems, we get eaten by hippos, even though they're herbivores, but they still kill a lot of people. We allow that non-reactivity to our internal distress because we do have a propensity towards panic. We need to panic, and we suspend it, and we welcome the internal experience, even when it's painful. It's running away from our pain that causes addiction, causes maladaptive behavior. It causes a lot of problems, running away from our pain rather than allowing it. I remember this many years ago. I learned this very painfully. I got my first of 6 kidney stone attacks. I don't know, kidney stones are hell. They say that it's the closest thing to giving birth. So you ladies who have given birth, God bless you. But at the end, at least you had like a little cute baby. At the end, all I had was a stone. And I'm like, hey, Fred, how you doing? Hey, how cute. You could make it a ring or something. But the fact, it's agonizing. And what I had to do is I had to learn, tapping me full of morphine and all these different things. I'm like, hit me again, medic. I felt like it was like World War II. But the fact is nothing helped. And so I had to just like because these kinds of pains, they happen in like surges, right? It hurts the whole time, but then it's like this surge. And I was there because it's trying to get rid of the stone. And I'm like, push, and Bill Cosby reference, probably not good to say that anymore. But it's doing all these different things. And I was pushed, but I had to just be present to the pain in the moment, and nothing else existed other than that pain. And it was the first time I think I was really present, non-judgmentally. Because what happens is that when we allow our emotions and anxieties to be present, we see the fullness of ourself and we start to be able to encounter God. Then when I relay that to God, that's prayer. I'm in pain. Help me. It's not an intellectual exercise anymore. It's visceral. It comes from the viscera, from the guts. That's really human. That's really human prayer. And so I can become mindful as well of the inner judge that's always judging. That's good, that's not good. And then we become schizophrenic in our mind. All of us in that moment, we're contending with different voices, right? He's my friend, you have no friends, right? It's just this horrible back and forth dialogue of pain. And we practice doing nothing so that when there's nothing to do, I'm at peace. So what does mindfulness help us to do as well? Mindfulness helps us never be bored. Boredom is the most bourgeois vice. Only comfortable rich people can. I'm so bored, you bore me. I have nothing to do. Entertain me, fool. Right? That's what we want. Well, when we're mindful, we can actually be content in ourselves. We can be content in the moment. I don't have to take the phone out of my pocket in the grocery store line and look at my precious. Right? I don't have to be self-obsessed and check social media every 5 minutes to see what everyone says about me and my experience. Right? We become present to the experience. We're alive. All human troubles come from not making a loving space for our experience and for our emotions. All human trouble, I'm going to say that again, all human troubles come from not making a loving space for my emotions. If we experience a trauma and we make no room, a loving space for ourselves and our emotions in it, what happens? It becomes a maladaptive personality disorder. If we go through stress and anxiety and we don't make room for our emotions, we become more stressed and more anxious, and the snowball buries us in the blizzard of fear. Mindfulness is the tending and befriending of ourselves, of our world, but most importantly, as Christians, realizing that when I allow that, I see that God is tending me, that God is befriending me, that God is present there for me in that moment. Because I can't be charitable and love other people if I don't love myself. I cannot be charitable and tend other people if I do not love myself. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your strength. Then love your neighbor. How? As yourself. If I don't love myself, I can't love my neighbor. And if I don't love myself, it's because I'm not paying attention to God loving me. I'm not mindful. I'm not aware. I'm living a mindless existence. That's what we're going to do in this class. Now let me tell you what it's not. It's not mindlessness. Now I want to make a note, because you hear mindfulness associated most often in our culture and society today with Buddhism. I have a profound love and a profound respect for the Buddhists, for the teachings of the Buddha. I think it is fantastic, interesting, culturally relevant stuff. I'm not a Buddhist. I don't believe in Buddhism. But at the same time, I am fascinated by an ancient religion, like I am fascinated by my late Greek ancestors who worshipped Zeus and Apollo. I think they have a lot to teach me. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey and I marvel in them. Fear or run away, dialogue and a conversation with people who have other beliefs than us. We have enough of that in our country today. Judge it, reject it, you're going to hell, you're evil, you're from Satan, gone. Really? We've never done that before. And that's why to this day, when you go to the Vatican Museum, what do you see? Pagan sculpture, Egyptian sculpture, Greek sculpture, Sumerian, Assyrian sculpture. You see the great Renaissance artists, the great Baroque artists reclaiming the pagan mythologies. You see the positions of Jesus and of the apostles in the same positions as the teachings of Aristotle and Plato. We can find, as St. Augustine would say, seeds of the word in anything. In Nostra Aetate, which is a document of the Second Vatican Council, it says, the Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in other religions. She regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflect a ray of the truth which enlightens all men. A ray of the truth. So when we look at Buddhism, particularly, especially because that's in the conversation, but if you look at the Kabbalic teachings of Judaism or the Sufi mystics of Islam, or you look at all those different things, they all have something worthwhile to teach us. They have seeds of the Word of God. They're seeds. We're the full blooming of the seed. We believe that as Christians, we are the banquet feast of the Lamb that you and I are invited to. But they still have the seeds. They have the ray of truth in all things, and I respect them and I love them. And I hope in the dialogues and conversations we have, I will be honest, I have received a couple of very, very nasty, uncharitable emails saying that I'm bringing Buddhism to the church. It's very sad, because it's jingoism, it is racism, it is horrible to say that other cultures and other religions don't have time. We believe that in our faith, by the revelation of Jesus Christ, we have the fullness of the truth, and that truth became incarnate, and he became man, and God walked amongst us and revealed himself to us and taught us the fullness of reality. But we can still have a dialogue. And that's why you and we can see inklings of the gospel in all things, whether it's in Buddhist practice in one way or another, or it's because I see some incarnational reality by watching Superman or Spider-Man. I can see it all over our culture. The pagans of the past and the pagans of the present have something to teach us. But it's hard to say what Buddhism actually believes. It's like saying Buddhists believe this is like saying monotheists believe that. Like, we don't. Buddhism is a huge school of thought. It's 2,600 years old, 600 years older than Catholicism, okay? It's about the same age as Judaism, maybe a little younger. But the fact is that it's an ancient religion. But the Buddha taught, and many Buddhists believe to the present day, that dissatisfaction, suffering, illness, aging, death are integral parts of life for all sentient beings. They're integral parts of life. But suffering is created by our own attachment, by our clinging. And just as we create our own suffering through our own efforts, we can also, Buddha says. And the way out of that cycle is a path of practice through which we can develop ethical behavior, concentration, or what is sometimes called mindfulness, and wisdom. And the Buddha would say, when we develop these attributes fully in ourselves, it can lead to an awakening and then a releasing of suffering. Suffering no longer exists because the world is seen as an illusion that I must transcend. And when I transcend that illusion, I find enlightenment, I find release, I find nirvana. Okay, so the material world for most Buddhists is an illusion that I need to escape. For a Christian, it's a reality that I must be completely mindful and present to, because it's in created reality that God created, saw it was good, created man as the pinnacle of that reality. So I am part of this material world. I am an incarnate soul myself. Okay, I am body and spirit, not just body, not just spirit. So I'm body and spirit, and because God took on humanity, became human, took on a human nature, that I find God everyday material existence. That's at the very heart and root of the idea that you hear from the Second Vatican Council and professed by particularly saints like Saint Josemaria Escrivá, the founder of Opus Dei, that I can sanctify my ordinary work in the middle of my ordinary everyday activities. Why? Because the normal stuff, the things of reality, the stuff is how I can find holiness in the middle of that. And mindfulness helps me do that. It's an escape, the Buddhists say, from suffering and the impermanence of reality. We say, I'm all in. Where they say escape, we say all in. I find God in the middle of my normal everyday stuff. And what happens with suffering? Suffering now, when I embrace suffering, when I take it on, suffering makes me the most present to my experience. And in that presence, I find the suffering God who came, was born, suffered, died, and then rose again. He didn't transcend reality, he perfected it. And you and I find it by being mindful and then allowing ourselves the experience of that. Isn't that beautiful? It's just beautiful. It's so poetic. That's why artists for 2,000 years never run out of material. They take the material world and say, I can find God in the middle of it. And that's why we go to art museums, or used to. Right? So, we're mind, body, and spirit. And the behavioral and physical benefits of mindfulness are amazing. So I want to go into a couple of those for you. Mindfulness switch, as I said, from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. And we'll talk about that a lot in the next class. We recognize and disengage as well behaviorally from self-perpetuating patterns that bring us unhappiness, rumination, okay? Negative thought patterns that come from sustained exercises constantly. I'm all jumbled up. Self-regulation also happens in mindfulness of attention that helps depression and moods. I actually become mindful of my moods. I become aware of my moods and I'm able to regulate them better. It helps enhance the ability to monitor thoughts before they get out of control. I'm sure we see this in temptation, don't we? People say a lot of times temptation. I don't know how hard the devil actually has to tempt us sometimes. Sometimes we just let ourselves go into a spiral. Mindfulness helps amazingly, by the way, with addiction. Addiction to anything. Mindful eating helps with eating addictions incredibly. Mindfulness practices, par excellence, help greatly. That associated with that and prayer, if someone has a pornography addiction or any sort of sexual addictions, mindfulness does amazing things because people become aware of the cycle before it begins with any addiction, from substance addiction or behavioral addictions. It helps enhance the ability to monitor and control thoughts. It also helps with different kinds of therapies. So different kinds of therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, which we'll be using in this class, dialectic behavioral therapy as well, different kinds of therapies that we enter into in our own therapeutic environments and interventions if we are there doing that. Really, really mindfulness helps us. Mindfulness also helps increase serotonin and dopamine levels in our mind. There are happy, feel-good drugs. And just for a moment, because I know a lot of medical professionals are watching this, I just thought that I would give a couple of things from medically minded. It increases brain function. Studies are indicating, tons of studies are being done on this now. Increases gray matter in the cingulate cortex, the temporoparietal junction, and the cerebellum. So your gray matter, all that like happy place of your brain, it grows. We can actually retrain our brains physically. It reduces stress. Shows reductions in stress correlated positively with decreases in the right basolateral amygdala gray matter density. And there are measurable increases in the magnitude of the cortisol awakening response, which is part of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Say that one 10 times fast. Suggesting improved stress resilience. So people are like, I get stressed so much. Mindfulness actually helps our brain to have greater resilience in handling stress. And it increases, this is huge, it increases physical immunity by reducing stress. So those of us that are worried and concerned about getting COVID and all these things, we really don't have much to worry about if our immune systems are doing well. Mindfulness, add that onto all the precautions that we take, plus a healthy diet, regular exercise, and most particularly the ending loneliness, which I'm going to go into in the next class a lot. Loneliness, if I wanted to create chronic illness, I would simply just create chronic loneliness. And if you're lonely, you are way more likely to die of anything. And many of us here know what that's like. Probably not the death part, because you wouldn't be here if you were ontologically challenged. But you and I, we live in a culture, no culture has ever been lonelier and yet more connected. Mindfulness will help us to learn what our needs are and then satisfy those needs and have those needs met. And we're going to go a lot into loneliness, because if you're lonely, if anyone watching this or listening to this is lonely, that's what hell is like. When we think of hell, it's not a fiery furnace that looks like a big giant rave party. hell, the fire of hell, the pain of hell, is that I am all alone, just me, forever. And I hate myself. I'm alone, and I hate myself. That's hell. Now, I don't know about you, but I know many, and many of us live in hell, and we don't have to. The benefits of this help in so many things physically, as well as mentally and spiritually. If you suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, psoriasis, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, all those things, studies are indicating in droves how helpful it is to do mindfulness. And how does this help us in our life of prayer? I want to go into this just a little bit and then we'll end. Let's look at the situation we find ourselves in today, okay? This is more my wheelhouse. I'm not a clinician nor am I a medical scientist. But there's a really great line that J.R.R. Tolkien used to say, "The time of men is passing. Now is the time of the orc." I would say that we live in the time of the orc. It's happened. If you read The Lord of the Rings, or if you've seen the movie, you notice that the world of men lives in a contemplative stance. They ponder, they contemplate, they create. They have a closeness to the present, to nature, to the transcendent. There's a sense of the mythic. There's a sense of legend. There's a poetry to life, the poetic. And they contemplate it. And in the order of perfection, you have men, but then you have the hobbits who are like doing that really well. And then par excellence are the elves. The elves are the ones who are the great creators of culture. They have this great peace about them. But if you juxtapose that, look at the orcs. The orcs, what happens with the orcs? They're noisy, constant, incessant activity. They're slaves. They're ignorant to the world around them. They walk with their head down. They're fearful. They're mindless. This is the age of the orc. Our culture has become this in so many ways. And in previous cultures, especially in the Western world, the world was set up in such a way that culture allowed and provided a context and a direction where we could focus our aspirations, right? There was a culture, a cult, if you will, that we all bought into, that we all understood. And as individuals, that's what created a collective society, that we were moving towards a collective goal. And we had a direction by which to focus our lives. It's the beauty of faith. It's the beauty of our faith that we have in so many ways, even as a church, corporately, we've lost that because we've allowed ourselves to be so worldly. Like American Catholics and Indian Catholics and Korean Catholics, we should be like, yeah, we get it. We notice what's going on in the world. But we're not. There's a bifurcation everywhere. And our communities and cultures are often set against each other, like the orcs. They're always fighting amongst themselves. That's why they never win a battle. Well, that's what's happening to us. And another part was that silence was a normal part of life. If you read The Lord of the Rings, for instance, if you read The Hobbit, if you read the Screwtape Letters, one of the great things that C.S. Eliot would speak about, C.S. Eliot, listen to me, that's T.S. Eliot. C.S. Lewis would be, there's something about the 20s, they love their initials. That C.S. Lewis would tell the young tempter, Wormwood, by the letters from Screwtape, he would say, look, you have to confuse them. Don't let them walk in the field and think about this one delightful pleasure that they have in life. Don't do that. Don't allow them to do that, because that's where they find God. That's where they find the transcendent. And in the past, we had to wake up at a certain time. We had to go shut down at a certain time. But electricity has changed that. Now we can be going at all times. And because of that, we have lost a shared ethos. We've lost shared stories, shared myths, shared legends, shared songs, shared poetry. We have nothing to delight in anymore. Wants to tear down statues and destroy culture because they don't have the culture. They don't know it. They don't know the songs. Most men live lives of quiet desperation and die with the song still in them. We've lost our song. They won't even let us sing in church anymore. They're trying to destroy our culture, what's left of it. And we must delight once again. Rediscover the mythic and poetic substructure that was our society and encounter the world anew. We are family, and as a family, we have to create culture again. That's what Pope John Paul II knew. He knew that the Marxists, that the communists wanted to destroy in Poland and in the Soviet Union, to destroy culture. That's why the first people they went after were the artists and the philosophers, the mystics, the contemplatives, the nuns, the monks, those that sat in silence and delighted because they were the creators of culture. And they're doing it again. The Marxists of our world, they are not gone. They are as strong as they were. And they're stronger now here than they are in the former Soviet Union. They want to destroy everything that is good. They want to destroy leisure. Today we have man caves. We don't have studies anymore. It's all about entertainment rather than cultivation of silence and rediscovery. Thomas Merton said this: exterior silence, its special necessity in our world in which there is so much noise and inane speech. Silence, not a virtue. Noise is not a sin. True. But the turmoil and confusion and constant noise of modern society are the expressions of the ambiance of its greatest sins, its godlessness, its despair. A world of propaganda, of endless argument, vituperation, great word, means bitter or abusive language. Criticism, or simply of chatter, is a world without anything to live for. Catholics who associate themselves with that kind of noise, who enter into the babble of tongues, become to some extent exiles from the city of God. Mass becomes a racket. It's babble. All prayer becomes exterior, with interior noise, soulless, and hasty repetition. Does that sound familiar? Thomas Merton wrote that many years ago, and it's more true today than ever. And of course, then we have the din of technology, the constant availability, the constant distractions, the constant pinging. We've lost the dynamism of the moment, and we're here to get it back. That's why we're here. To get back our peace, our purpose, our poetry, our joy. And no time is better than now. Ever since COVID-19 hit, the worry and the fears hurt us. We're afraid to take risks anymore. We've created, in effect, a physical, mental, and spiritual agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is an anxiety disorder characterized by symptoms of anxiety in situations where a person perceives their environment to be unsafe and there's no way to escape. How does that sound? Does that sound like we're feeling? Agoraphobic. And so it feels like things are falling apart for us. And at the same time, we have societal loss, rebellion of reason against reason in our schools, Marxists in our streets, fear and division between friends, between neighbors, even with our family members. The city seems to be headed for a disaster of biblical proportions. Mr. Mayor, it's Old Testament kind of stuff, wrath of God kind of stuff, fire and brimstone coming down from the sky, rivers and seas boiling, the dead rising from their graves, humans sacrificed, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. That's Ghostbusters. But it feels like Ghostbusters. It feels like the city is crumbling around us and we are dying. And we don't have to. You know why? Because he's died already and rose from the dead, and we got nothing to fear. And as long as we become mindful, and then we become mindful of him, we're free, even if we're sick, even if we're in pain, even if we are really, really suffering. We can't live in a sick environment and expect to be healthy. In sick environments, sickness is the norm, and health is abnormal. Our culture is sick. And until we become mindful and present to the reality of God in our life and our own self, then we can't be healthy. So I think we're here for a good purpose. This is my hope for this class, that it will be an introduction to mindfulness in theory and in practice, that we will actually practice it together. My hope is you will realize that life is worth living, that we do not have to walk through the valley of tears. And though I walk through the valley of the shadow, I realize there's not much left. Yes, Coolio even has a C to the word, and I messed it up. We open our minds as well here to the rich experience of mindful awareness in the Catholic tradition, in the Christian tradition, and then we're able to enter into a dialogue with other religions. I'm most particularly happy that there are so many people that watch this who are from mixed families, where there are perhaps Christians, but many of their family members are Buddhist. And I think this will create a really beautiful dialogue, and I hope you'll invite them to the church to hear more about it. That we'll be able to find seeds of the word and other things. That'll help us better understand our anxiety and how to cope with it. And then it's going to provide a context and a vocabulary by which we can discuss anxiety, most particularly in therapy, but particularly with our family and friends as well. And that mental and spiritual health are, and I would argue, more important than physical health. Like, we could be physically healthy and be in our homes, but if we're not mentally healthy or behaviorally healthy or spiritually healthy, then we're alone in this enclave, this hellish enclave. And I'd rather not live that way. I don't know about you, and I hope others will be able to enjoy their life more, but the body and soul living together, and to help us experience these dark times. And that's my hope, that we'll overcome this agoraphobia with each other. And as we come out of the pain and suffering that we've experienced in COVID, as we're starting to hopefully come out of it, and when it stops being politicized, we'll be able to look back and reflect on it mindfully. We'll actually be able to do something Jason Bourne had trouble with, and that's know ourselves. I want to be able to say that at the end of this, all of us will know who we are, just a little bit more, and to know God. Let me say, what is this class going to look like? It's about 12 weeks long, every Thursday at 7 p.m. We're going to be live streaming it. It's going to be available on my website, which is holiness.work. Holiness.work. It's an easy website to go to. You just click on the mindfulness class and it'll drop down. Every class is going to have a blog post, and everything that I mentioned in the class will be there. You'll also have recordings of the class, links to my podcast. The podcast is called Holiness for the Working Day. I got that from Shakespeare's Henry V. At the end of Henry V, towards the end, right before the Battle of Agincourt, the herald comes to Henry in Shakespeare's Henry V, and he says, "Do you yield? Will you yield? Because 2,000 English are about to fight 20,000 French." And Henry has just given the great happy few, we band of brothers, for he today he shall be my brother. You know that one. Well, afterwards there's another piece, and it says, he says, "Tell, herald, tell the king this. We are but warriors for the working day. Our gayness and our guilt are all besmirched by the rainy march and the fearful battle, but by the mass our hearts are in the trim. We are but warriors for the working day." Well, what's our battle? Holiness. Holiness. And so my podcast is on there. This is what the class is going to look like. Next class, we're going to go into the cycle of and the power of anxiety and the power of loneliness and different considerations in that. The next class will be on the Christian tradition of mindfulness in the Old and New Testament. We're going to go through the Desert Fathers, the monastic traditions, some of the writings of the great saints. We're also going to discuss mindfulness through modern times, particularly Cardinal Ratzinger's work when he was prefect of the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith. He wrote a letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church on some aspects of Christian meditation on October 15th, 1989. And he talked about what we need to be cautious of when we come to meditation, especially when we're engaging some Eastern aspects. And then we'll talk a bit about Cardinal Sarah and his writings on the importance of silence. That's a class after that. We'll have 2 classes on distress tolerance. How do I tolerate distress first before I do any mindfulness? Then we're going to go into some cognitive behavioral therapy, understanding our thoughts and our feelings. That'll probably be 2 classes. And then engaging those thoughts and feelings and learning how to reframe them so that we're not held slave to our dysfunctional thinking. We're going to then learn how to live and work well and mindfully. And we're going to be talking for 2 classes on what's called optimal work, working optimally, mindfully. That'll help you in classes. It'll be particularly helpful in students. It's a course or a conversation that I've given to many college students and high schools. We're going to go into, in another class, perfectionism, self-esteem, shame, the power of vulnerability, and self-compassion will be another one. Then we're going to go into some more Catholic mindful practices, discernment of spirits by St. Ignatius of Loyola, Lectio Divina, ways of praying with the Word of God, Scripture, and then the Examen prayer by St. Ignatius of Loyola, as well as abandonment to divine providence, which is another way of praying, and then other sundry ideas that we're going to be going through. Each class will begin with this is the structure. We'll begin with prayer, because we always begin with prayer, then a mindfulness practice, a brief one, then the topic, then I'm going to be open for questions, which will not be recorded, just because they can't hear you. And then we're going to end with a practice. And tonight, I know I've been going on a little longer, we will do a mindfulness practice if you would like to stay. And that's what we will be doing in this class. Please, I ask you, please share this if you find it helpful. You can share it personally. The best way to share something is to say, I think you would like this. Here's a link. It's human. You can use anti-social media if you would like. I call it that because it's not social. There's nothing social about it. You do not make a genuine human connection. No one has ever said, oh, I was convinced by your argument on Facebook. No one has ever said that. Once. Ever. Right? So you can share it on because if you think people would watch it, but I don't know about you, but I think most people actually don't click on it and watch the whole thing. They'll watch a 5-second video or a long talk. We'll generally run about an hour. The practice might run a little over. So I will be available after these classes out in the vestibule if you would like to ask questions, and people can always find the different ways of contacting me through email in the parish if they have other questions like that. I don't like being too available that way because most of the time people just shoot off emails, they don't think about it, and that's not communicating. Communicating is being present to one another. Isn't that beautiful? Can we do that? Yeah. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being so brave. We'll just say a little prayer, okay? And the most beautiful mindfulness prayer of all time. And then we'll do a practice for anyone that would like to stay. This will not be on the video presentation, however. But I will do a podcast with this. My podcast, there'll be supplemental podcasts along the way that'll actually have like just a practice that you can listen to while you're praying in a car. Where don't do mindfulness too much in the car because you'll fall asleep maybe. And anyway, so why don't we say a prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Why is it the most beautiful mindfulness prayer ever? Because Jesus was always mindful of the presence of the Father. And that is the meaning of life. You want to know the meaning of life? You heard it in the first class. Be mindful of the presence of the Father. That's the whole point of life.